Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Hello, everyone. I wrote this at 3 in the morning. I believe God gave me the words. I'm so humbled and honored to be before you all. I'm especially nervous following two of the most amazing speakers I've ever met, Dr. Goka and Charlie Kirk. They are so knowledgeable, and I'm very new to this, so I'm going to do something a little different. I'd like you all to use your imagination and come with me on a short journey back in time. Like a little over 10 years ago, I was an alcoholic and a crack cocaine addict. On January 16, 2009, God freed me from these and other addictions and started me on a path to a restored heart. Praise Jesus. I woke up from years of addiction, and I was oblivious as to what was going on in our country. What I saw before me were friends unemployed, terrible political correctness, people saying happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas, and people trying to take God out of everything and not even acknowledging Jesus Christ. I saw myself thinking back in time to my childhood when seeds of patriotism were planted in our schools, like when we pledged allegiance to the flag and recited that we were one nation under God. I now saw high prices, a poor economy, high crime, police getting attacked for doing their job. The family values and morality were missing. A president was apologizing to the world for us being the USA and giving billions of dollars to evil empires. A new evil was taking over called ISIS. Quite frankly, it looked like the end times prophesied in the Bible. I saw my family and friends living in fear what had happened to our country. I now bring you back in time to the summer of 2015. I see Donald Trump coming down an escalator and announcing he's running for president. For me, it was a divine and miraculous moment. I felt that something miraculous was about to unfold. Then I found myself wanting to learn something I knew nothing about, which was politics. I didn't know a liberal from a conservative. I started reading about it, and I couldn't believe what I read. I definitely know who I am. My biggest surprise was that I couldn't find any crossover. I tried in my mind to make common sense out of this and why anyone would want to be where we had gone as a people and a country. It didn't make any sense what people were doing. And now we go back in time to 2016, and I see myself in divine appointments, and one was especially important. Donald Trump invited me to meet him at Trump Tower in New York City. I walked into his office with high hopes on August 15, 2016. I walked out of that office after meeting with him, and I knew God had chosen him for such a time as this. God answered our prayers, our millions of prayers, and gave us grace, and a miracle happened on November 8, 2016. We were given a second chance and time granted to get our country back on track with our conservative values and getting people saved in Jesus' name. As I stand before you today, I see the greatest president in history. Of course he is. He was chosen by God. I see record low unemployment. I see from African Americans to Hispanics at an all-time low. I see 5 million new jobs created since Donald Trump took office. I see wages going up. Entrepreneurs are taking risks again with consumer confidence at an all-time high. I see GDP growth approaching 4%. I see ISIS demolished and trade deals getting made and getting done. I see promises made and promises kept. I feel hope. We finally have a common sense, pragmatic, conservative president who keeps his word. I now realize how important politics are and how they affect everything we do. But what I don't understand is the hate. Now I turn the channel and I see a world of no common sense and hate for our president. Why would people want to have no borders and drugs coming into our country when we have the worst drug epidemic in our history? I have news for them. This is very dear to me, being an ex-addict, and I was there when the president signed the 800-page opiate bill. And I know all the great things that are getting done in spite of this no common sense resistance and hate. We will beat the drug crisis in our president's next 6 years in office. I see a party saving minnows in California and killing babies in New York. Are you kidding me? You know, where is that common sense? One of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not kill. Well, this is going to change. Last summer, I was called by some movie producers who asked me to have a part in a movie called Unplanned. It's a true story about Abby Johnson, who was director at Planned Parenthood. And she quit after seeing what really goes on there and seeing how children are getting murdered. After hearing this and knowing what a great message this movie would bring, I not only said I would be in it, but I would also help finance it. And it was filmed at a secret location last year, and with God's perfect timing in history, it's coming to theaters everywhere March 29th. And here's a trailer for you guys to see.
Are you ready?
Are you kidding? I've been waiting for this my whole life. For me to get behind anything, I have to be 100% all in. I either go, there's nothing in between. And just like with My Pillow, when I went all in with My Pillow, and then I find out what this movie was about and when the message behind it and everything, and it was, I said, I'm in 100%.
You guys, this movie that I went in, it's been under attack, and it just received an R rating. Hello. Where's the common sense where a 15-year-old can go out and get an abortion without permission from her parents, but you have to have permission or be with your parents to see this movie? What's wrong with that? We're gonna be showing this movie tonight in its entirety at 7 o'clock. You guys should all watch it. It's gonna change lives. And my prayer is that this movie will stop the killings. Praise Jesus, we have a president who stands for the unborn babies and now even ones that they kill after they're born. I want to say God bless you all. God bless our president, and God bless the United States of America.
It is Friday, the 1st of March of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, folks. The French 77s are all lined up for your imbibing pleasure. And after that screed by the My Pillow guy, I think you're going to need one. Okay, please help yourself, because the My Pillow guy, God, he is awesome. Oh my God. I love how he starts off like he's new to this thing about being in front of people and telling them a bunch of grifter lies, because I think he was at CPAC last year. All right? Come on. He has been on some sort of weird political kick for a few years, especially during the Obama years. Please. And also, it is rich that they would have, they being CPAC, would have the MyPillow guy speaking because, and attesting, not only speaking, but attesting to the character of Donald Trump. Since, according to the MyPillow guy, Donald Trump was anointed by God to be our president. Our president? Yeah, right. And it's just rich to know that the MyPillow guy ought to know, because he has been sued in many states for being pretty much a grifter and a fraud. Outside of just the fact that he doesn't pay his people, his product is sometimes shoddy. God. It cracks me up. Now, MyPillow is the pet rock of today. Give me a break. It's a pillow. Like some sort of special pillow. Yeah. People. He could have sold, a Linus blanket. Your security blanket. No, let's give him a pillow. And he did. And I got to say, he said that 10 years ago, apparently, God saved him from the addiction of alcohol and cocaine. Well, what are you taking now? I mean, you're off the alcohol and the cocaine. I'm curious what you're on now, because that guy is... Well, he was in front of the CPAC Incel General Assembly, and there's a lot of sexual tension going on at CPAC. There always is. It used to be that CPAC was where, all the funny right-wing kids went to have sex. And not so much now anymore, apparently. And that tension's going to spill over, so to speak, and it won't be pretty, and we better be prepared. What's on the rest of the menu since MyPillow guy took so much of the Bistro Cafe part of our West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy salon? Well, how about this? Rather than preventing disasters, Trump's Department of Interior seems to be encouraging them. It is weird, isn't it? Okay. Foul everything? I mean, even if the Russians take over, do they want foul? Well, look at some of their production sites. Yeah, they really care, huh? A new complaint filed by immigration groups cites an alarming increase in infants held in ICE custody. There are more babies in icebox baby gulags than they've let us know. And they're not taking care of them very well like they care. And indicting a sitting president is tricky. But indicting his children, not so much. And we will. After the break, we then, of course, move to the chef's table, where in a tense closed-door meeting, Nancy Pelosi and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez chewed out House Dems, who keep voting with the other side of the aisle. They're procedural votes. The American public, as pretty much a whole, doesn't care about procedural votes. Stop doing it. It's getting us in trouble again. And Trump's year-long bombing campaign that pitted some of America's most high-tech fighter jets against a few of the most primitive Taliban heroin labs has quietly ended after failing to achieve much of anything. Where have I heard that story before? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Do tune into her shows on Saturday. The first one being At the Table with Kelly Lincoln. That begins at 3 p.m. on the West Coast. Of course, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. Figure out what it is in your time zone. Or, yeah, do. And then later on, she teams up with Ricky May for pretty much the official launch of the Late Night Morning Show. And you know what? It is a late night morning show as no other late night morning show has ever been before in the history of terrestrial and internet radio. Indeed. So that begins at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast. So do tune into that, the Late Night Morning Show with Ricky and Kelly. Okay, so if you will then take a look at the leftish of the homepage there at the bottom of our homepage at networksradio.com, the contribute button is there. And I've been reminding folks, I just noticed that Inslee has officially thrown his hat in the ring, and I need to remind folks, I do have a campaign to not run for president. And your contribution, a recurring contribution to Netroots Radio, assures that I not only not run for president, but it also assures that Netroots Radio pays the bills so Resistance Radio can continue resisting as the founders originally intended, indeed. So please do contribute to Netroots Radio so that I will not run for president, as my motto is clear: never, more than ever. All right. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. The show notes and links diary is posted about 10 minutes before showtime. And you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, because they're there. All right, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. I've been telling everybody, oh yeah, you got to have at least 2 of these French 77s. Don't drink more than 2, and drink copious amounts of water. You know, we learned that way back, even before they suggested that you do it. It just made sense. I mean, alcohol dehydrates you. Hydrate yourself and open up those brain cells. You won't get such, well, brain cells, the blood vessels in your neck and head, and you won't get a headache. I mean, it just made sense. But yeah, don't drink more than 2, because you'll need someone who has not had a drop to guide you. Okay, trust me, I know from whence I speak. I've seen it happen to people. I was a bartender, and bartenders know. As AOC has said. All right, this first offering here is by Lisa Needham out of Share Blue Media. Trump's Department of Interior has been quietly handing out hundreds of waivers to offshore oil drillers, and it is an environmental disaster waiting to happen. Now, I got to tell you, I've worked in the oil fields. I worked my way up into a supervisory position. I was there for quite a few years. And I don't think it's a disaster waiting to happen. I think it's a disaster that they want to happen. This is a little bit too cute by half. Now, back in 2010, America saw the largest, it wasn't an ocean oil spill. That's how it's reported here. I need to remind people. It wasn't an oil spill. It was an oil blowout. Big difference. So it was the biggest ocean oil spill blowout in history when the Deepwater Horizon, a rig owned by British Petroleum, and here she actually says it had a blowout preventer failure. Yes, a spill is considerably different than a blowout. All right, a spill is like when you poured too much coffee and it's kind of spilled over the top. A blowout is pretty much an explosive event. And you really don't want to be around it. You don't want to be looking into it. That's for sure. Well, of course, the blowout preventer is essentially a piece of equipment that was supposed to shut off a high-pressure flow of oil and gas and didn't do so. It was a spill so bad that BP agreed to pay $4.5 billion in fines and plead guilty to 14 criminal charges. It wasn't a spill, a blowout. Under Obama, the Department of Interior created stronger rules for blowout preventers to try to prevent another Deepwater Horizon, which had resulted in 11 deaths and over 3 million barrels of oil leaking into the Gulf of Mexico. Under Trump, though, there seems to be no appetite for any sort of regulation, even one to stop large-scale ecological disasters. Instead, Interior has granted nearly 1,700 exemptions to the Obama safety rules, and the bulk of those exemptions allow oil companies to ignore the stronger blowout preventer rules. Now let's remember, it's not as if the Deepwater Horizon spill occurred 75 years ago and the industry could easily point to massive advancements in oil containment and safety technology in the ensuing decades. Look, the spill itself was less than a decade ago, and the Obama-era regulations were only in effect for about the last 6 months of his administration. Put another way, pretty much the very minute the regulations went into effect, the industry began complaining they were outdated. And in the swampy Trump administration, they immediately found a willing audience for the argument. These moves by the Department of Interior are entirely in keeping with the administration's other anti-science, anti-environment steps. Under Trump, the EPA has drastically decreased inspections of polluters and is using junk science to justify lowering emissions standards. And the administration's commitment to disbelieving climate change is legendary, going so far as to try to set up a climate change panel that has no climate change experts on the panel. This administration is devoted to letting the oil industry call the shots, and the industry hates regulations because of that. It's only a matter of time before we see another Deepwater Horizon, or worse. Rebecca Intralgo of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. At least 9 infants under 1 year of age are being detained at a South Texas family residential center in Dilley, Texas. Oh, you mean another one of those icebox baby gulags? Okay. And according to a complaint filed yesterday by the American Immigration Council, American Immigration Lawyers Association, and the Catholic Immigration Network, one of the infants has been detained for over 20 days. The groups allege that ICE is unable adequately to care for non-citizen minors in its custody and call for the immediate release of the infants and their mothers. The complaint was filed with the Department of Homeland Security's Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties and the Office of the Inspector General. We have grave concerns about the lack of specialized medical care available in Dilley for this vulnerable population, the complaint states. Continuing with the complaint, stating advocacy groups have long documented the limited access to adequate medical care in family detention centers, including this STFRC. Concerns include lengthy delays in receiving medical attention and lack of appropriate follow-up treatment. Now, ICE is required to adhere to basic standards of care for children in its custody in accordance with the Flores versus Reno, also known as the Flores Settlement. Now, of course, the Flores Settlement states that the government is to provide minors with food, drinking water, medical assistance in emergency situations, toilets, temperature control, and physical separation from non-family members. The floor settlement also placed a 20-day limit on how long a child can remain in immigration law enforcement custody. I think what they're having a problem with is that they have a glut of all these kids that they're trying to adopt out through DeVos's adoption scam at $45,000 a pop. I wish people would look at that a little bit more, actually. News of the increase in infants detained at Dili comes the same week as the Congressional Hispanic Caucus announced it is seeking a full investigation after an immigrant woman gave birth to a stillborn while in ICE custody earlier this month. ICE officials reported that over the last 2 years, 28 women, 28, have miscarried while in their custody. With 2,400 beds, Dili is one of the largest family detention centers in the country. It has faced a significant influx in the number of people housed there after Trump enacted and then later reversed a zero-tolerance policy at the border, which separated immigrant children from their parents. Adam Peck brings us this final offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, on Wednesday, former Donald Trump attorney and self-styled fixer Michael Cohen spent the entire day testifying before the House Oversight Committee about the various crimes and misdeeds perpetuated by the appointed president of the United States. Bank fraud, tax fraud, and blatant campaign finance violations were among the allegations leveled by Cohen, who came prepared with the receipts. Cohen's testimony is hardly the first time Trump has been credibly accused of felonious financial crimes, but never have accusations been as thoroughly buttressed with documentation and specificity, of course. The big question for the country is not whether Trump committed crimes. That is already a certainty. The question is, can a sitting president be brought up on charges, and if so, will any of those charges stick? Well, apparently there's a lot of debate about that. I thought that no man was, or woman, no person was above the law. And I think that what the argument here is that by dint of simply being the president of the United States, you are no longer a person. You're no longer a citizen. You are some higher form of life, a much more advanced form of life, in which the laws of all us common folk, we citizens, do not apply. Let's just take that argument on its face value. Okay, you can't indict a sitting president of the crimes until they're no longer president. So let's look at the gambit that, just as an aside here, before we get into Ivanka and the rest. All right. Does Trump really think that as long as he holds on to the presidency, even if it's by subterfuge and violent action, I will not give up the presidency even if I'm voted out? Because as long as he's president, he can't be indicted for the crimes he's committed? Was this a get-out-of-jail-free card? Hold on to the presidency, and he won't go to jail? You never know. I mean, the guy's not really the brightest bulb at Fordham, was he? Let's just take it at face value. We cannot go after Trump himself, but his children do not have that exalted status. I know they want to confer it upon them, but too bad. And they're going to be hauled up. And they Cummings has already put out the feelers to say, okay, we'll work with you about when you show, but you're going to show. And we'll see if they're going to invoke executive privilege, which is usually not the case when you're not really a hired person in the administration, which they can't be. It's all a foobar, isn't it? Well, let's fix it, and we can fix it by voting. All right, let's get to our break, and when we come back from that break, you know we're going to go through weather from around the world, and you know that we're going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Love Hurts. Polish director Paweł Pawlikowski, who scored the Oscar for Foreign Language Film in 2012 with Ida, is back with another stunning period piece entitled Cold War, this time with 3 nominations, including that for cinematography and direction. It's the story of 2 lovers based on the lives of Pawlikowski's parents during the era of Soviet domination in Poland. We first meet Victor in the late 1940s as a talent scout, traveling the country looking for authentic peasant music. Upon meeting Zula, a performer 10 years his junior, the two begin a passionate but destructive romance that runs the course of the film on both sides of the Iron Curtain. Obviously, there's more than one Cold War going on here. The film does Roma one better as it's shot not only in black and white, but in 4:3, giving the bleak Polish countryside and the smoky jazz clubs of beat-era Paris a devastating film noir appearance. Matching the cinematography is a soundtrack with everything from Polish folk melodies to Russian choral music to American jazz and rock, with accompanying choreography not seen on screen that often. Carrying the well-done and well-conceived picture, however, are the performances of the 2 leads, Joanna Kulig as Zula and Thomas Kott as Victor. Kulig is intense in intimate scenes and a force of nature on stage. One scene with her dancing to Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock in a Paris nightclub with powerfully expressive facial shots of Kott's Victor encapsulates the whole movie. Kott's an amalgam of leading men from the era of Gary Cooper and Gregory Peck, quiet, dark, and strong, but ultimately not strong enough. Kula and Victor are tortured equally by each other's presence and absence, and their Cold War is one not to miss. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The compounds THC and CBD are known as cannabinoids because they come from cannabis, aka marijuana. Now biologists have taken the genes that produce cannabinoids in weed and plugged them into yeast.
Yeah, there's several reasons. The first is cost.
Jay Kiesling is a synthetic biologist at UC Berkeley who has previously programmed yeast to cheaply produce anti-malarial drugs. He says yeast could conceivably produce cannabinoids for about $400 a kilogram. That's compared to the $40,000 a kilo price tag when using synthetic chemistry. Other benefits exist too.
There are about 100 different cannabinoids that naturally occur in cannabis, but it's been really hard to do research on those because there's not much available. They are produced in such minute quantities in the cannabis that you'd have to purify huge amounts of cannabis just to get a small quantity of them to test.
Kiesling says they can even make cannabinoids that don't exist in nature at all by feeding the yeast certain fatty acids. The resulting cannabinoids, which are chemically similar but not identical to garden variety THC and CBD, have little appendages the scientists can do chemistry on.
We could attach an antibody to it and get it to go to a certain location in the human body based on the antibody. We could also put a tail on it that would allow it to be put into a patch so it could cross the skin and be used like the nicotine patches. We could also put another drug on it so you'd have a dual action therapy. And this is something that kind of came out of the research that we didn't expect.
Their research is in the journal Nature. Kiesling has already founded a new company called Demetrix to study these yeast-produced medicines. But there are also more mundane things you could do with this technology. Many people, for example, are already enthusiasts of the fermented beverages yeast produce. A certain segment of them may also be fans of cannabinoids. With this technology, Kiesling says you could produce a THC or CBD beer, which would give a new meaning to This Bud's for You.
This Bud's for you.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
So here's to you. You know there's no one else who does it quite the way.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. Nearly 1 million coal miners went on strike in Great Britain. A period of great labor unrest marked the year leading up to the massive walkout from the mines. In 1911, dock workers and railroad workers walked off the job. Overall, workers participated in more than 850 strikes. Even school children, fed up with the disciplinary practice of caning, went out on strike. Mine workers in South Wales joined the wave of strikers, but ultimately their actions were defeated. Undeterred by the setback, the Welsh miners demanded the Miners' Federation of Great Britain to take a vote among all miners on the question of establishing a national minimum wage. Up to that time, miners' pay fluctuated with the uncertainty of the coal markets. The miners resoundingly voted to take on the wage issue. They cast ballots 4-1 in favor of a national strike. Nearly 1 million miners answered the call. Alarmed, the Times declared the strike the greatest catastrophe that has threatened the country since the Spanish Armada. The owners of the White Star Line worried that their new ship, the Titanic, would have to travel at reduced speeds on her maiden voyage due to the coal shortage. They scrambled to find more coal, ultimately taking the supply from other ships to ensure their new luxury liner would meet the advertised speeds. Recognizing the impact of the miners' strike on industry and commerce, the government responded by passing a new law through Parliament, calling for a minimum wage to be set district by district. After 37 days, the strike was ended. Not all of the miners received the wages they had hoped for, but the strike had resoundingly proven the power of organized labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Another day, another bombshell report about Donald Trump. This time, the New York Times is reporting that Donald Trump ordered his then chief of staff, John Kelly, to give his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, a top-secret security clearance, despite serious concerns flagged by top officials. CNN has the story.
Keep in mind that he did this even though intelligence officials and the top White House lawyer said that he shouldn't. It alarmed the then chief of staff, John Kelly, so much that he wrote an internal memo. And the memo was about how he had been, quote, ordered, this was the word he used, to give Kushner the top secret clearance. Then the White House counsel, Don McGahn, also wrote a memo detailing all the concerns that had been raised about giving Kushner the security clearance. But then, on top of it, it appears he lied about it. Here he is just last month, and his daughter echoing what he said just a couple weeks ago.
Tell General Kelly or anyone else in the White House to overrule security officials, the career?
No, I don't think I have the authority to do that. I'm not sure I did, but I wouldn't do it. Jared's a good. I was never involved with his security. I know that he, just from reading, I know that there was issues back and forth about security for numerous people, actually, but I don't want to get involved in that stuff.
The president had no involvement pertaining to my clearance or my husband's clearance.
One of the New York Times reporters who broke the story, Matt Rosenberg, has more.
What we were told is that, Jared had numerous problems. They went back to the very beginning of the administration. Finally, last year, the president said, give him a security clearance, and that John Kelly understood it to be an order. He wrote a memo about it at that time. In addition, Don McGahn, the White House counsel, wrote a memo outlining kind of the issues here. And yet, because the president definitely does have the authority to order somebody to be given a clearance, Mr. Kushner and Ivanka Trump both got their clearances.
Michael Cohen wrapped up his 3 days of testimony on Capitol Hill Thursday after 7 hours in front of the House Intelligence Committee. He emerged from the hearing telling the press he'd be back Wednesday for yet another round of questioning. While most eyes were focused on the Michael Cohen hearings and the summit in Vietnam between Trump and Kim Jong-un, tensions heated up between the two nuclear powers of India and Pakistan this week. New York Times' Nicholas Kristof explains what's happening there.
The real risk of nuclear war in the last week did not involve North Korea. It involved India and Pakistan. And there was an incident in which a Pakistani terrorist group, Jaish-e-Mohammed, blew up a bus with 40 paramilitaries in India and Kashmir. That started hostilities that began escalating. And India is facing an election soon, so the prime minister was under great pressure. He then had airstrikes on Pakistan. We have two countries with nuclear weapons pointed at each other. When people do war games, they very quickly escalate into actually using those warheads. But today there's actually progress. Prime Minister Imran Khan of Pakistan has promised to release the Indian pilot who was shot down. And I think that is actually going to be a way to de-escalate this. I think a lot of people were really concerned that this was just going to escalate and could be very, very scary. And I think now we can foresee a path out of this, but with a caveat that it is still absolutely outrageous for Pakistan to provide a base for groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed that engage in these kind of terrorist activities.
For the second day in a row, on Thursday, the House passed legislation toughening the background check system for gun purchases. The bill, approved on a largely party-line vote of 228 to 198, would increase from 3 days to at least 10 the number of days a seller has to wait for a response from the system before transferring a firearm. But like the bill the House passed on Wednesday to extend background checks to private transactions at gun shows and over the Internet, Thursday's bill is unlikely to be voted on by the Republican-controlled Senate. Trump has threatened to veto both bills if by some chance they reached his desk. Big news out of Israel, where a sitting prime minister can apparently be indicted. NBC has more.
Israel's prime minister appeared to choke up, defending himself against charges he says were cooked up by his enemies. They're spilling my wife's blood. They're persecuting my sons. They brought my family through the 7 circles of hell, he said. Just hours earlier, the attorney general announced he plans to indict Netanyahu for fraud, bribery, and breach of trust. Police accused Netanyahu of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts, including cigars, champagne, jewelry, and flattering media coverage in exchange for backing legislation to help wealthy businessmen. President Trump, an ardent supporter, defended Netanyahu.
That I can say this, that he's done a great job as prime minister. He's tough, he's smart, he's strong.
But how strong will now be tested with elections in just 40 days.
If the case goes ahead, Netanyahu would be the first sitting Israeli prime minister to be indicted.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. President Trump walked away from talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam on Thursday after failing to reach agreement on denuclearization and sanctions issues. Speaking to reporters in Hanoi, Trump hinted at where he and Kim butted heads.
They were willing to denuke a large portion of the areas that we wanted, but we couldn't give up all of the sanctions for that.
It's believed North Korea offered to decommission its Yongbyon nuclear reactor, but in exchange wanted the U.S. to lift all sanctions. For its part, the U.S. suspected Yongbyon might be on the table, but hoped North Korea would fess up about many of its undeclared nuclear and missile sites. Carlisle Thayer is Emeritus Professor of Politics at Australia's University of New South Wales.
Secretary Pompeo wanted a big step and had a list of classified installations that the U.S. felt North Korea didn't know the U.S. knew about and wanted access to them and no movement on the sanctions. There's where the rubber hit the road.
It turns out reconciling contradictory visions of denuclearization is hard work for heads of state. And even though Trump and Kim reportedly agreed to continue talks, it's unclear how the two sides intend to make progress. North Korea prefers dealing directly with Trump and has repeatedly boxed out Secretary Pompeo. On the U.S. side, envoy Steve Begin was relegated to playing a bit part in Hanoi after spending weeks engaged in shuttle diplomacy, a sign the U.S. may be struggling to find credible negotiators besides the president. Unless the White House can sort out how to keep talking without Trump and Kim meeting face-to-face, Thayer thinks U.S.-North Korea diplomacy could lose momentum.
Like an inoculation, one summit's a booster, two is really great if you get a result, but they wear off. Who's going to be excited about a third summit meeting unless there is substantial agreement that we know about in public ahead of time?
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, folks. We are all Nighthawks in the diner of life, and especially so here at the chef's table. We always like to begin weather from around the world right here along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 34 degrees Fahrenheit. We are expected to have a high of 48, which will bring on the attendant fog, since that's the kind of weather pattern that we've been having. Winds are currently out of the east-southeast, light and variable. Will remain so, it looks like, for the at least through today and through tomorrow. And we are also currently under a dense fog advisory. It's not very foggy right at this very moment here at the mothership, but in the outlying areas where I have to go to do chores, indeed it will be. So I will be taking care. Looks like we're going to have an overnight low of about 28 to 30 degrees. I should mention, today we are expecting to have about a third to a half inch of rain beginning in another 2 hours. So there's always that. And we have a smaller chance of rain tonight, and the lows are going to be in the upper 20s, low 30s. Winds will remain light and variable, as I mentioned. And smaller chance of rain tomorrow, where it's supposed to be partly cloudy, partly sunny. with a high of 53 and an overnight low of 31. Well, we'll see how that's going to be for the weekend. We are expecting a lot more rain and more storms coming Saturday or Sunday, maybe Monday if we're lucky, huh? Well, pollen is right now at none. Air quality index is in the good range at 33 parts per million. Not so good for those with breathing problems. The daytime UV index is into the moderate range, which isn't so very good, and it is at 3. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.83 inches. Visibility is down to a half mile, and humidity is at 98%. Oh, so there's where the fog is. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 52 and cloudy. Paris is 52 and cloudy. Rome is 58 and mostly cloudy. Kiev is 34 degrees with a light snow and a lot of wind. Kabul is 32 degrees with a light snow. Hong Kong is 67 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 47 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 72 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees and partly cloudy with a active advisory, a small craft advisory, so take care out there on the bay and offshore. And New York is a crisp 30 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Noor Al-Sabai of Raw Story brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tore into fellow Democrats for voting with the GOP on procedural votes during an emotional closed-door session yesterday. Politico reported that Pelosi warned moderate members of the caucus that they could lose financial support from the DCCC if they kept voting with the opposite side of the aisle. The move came after an embarrassing moment in which Republicans tacked on to a universal background check for firearm purchases bill, an amendment that would send ICE updates when undocumented immigrants buy guns. 26 Democrats voted with the GOP on the amendment, and it passed with the ICE language, spoiling an important Democratic legislative achievement. An earlier GOP motion condemning anti-Semitism was successfully attached to a House resolution barring U.S. involvement in the Yemeni civil war. That maneuver, which was backed by every Democrat, later caused parliamentary problems in the Senate and upended Democratic attempts to challenge Donald Trump's foreign policy. Pelosi chided the caucus after the upsets, telling them, "This is not a day at the beach. This is the Congress of the United States." In addition to Nancy Pelosi's warnings, headline grabbing? We're going to edit that. Freshman Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also suggested that she would inform progressive activists when moderate Democrats vote with the GOP. With her warnings, Pelosi came up against House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer and Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, her longtime allies, who believe moderate members can vote with Republicans if they think it will improve their political standing. Well, it will not, and it hurts the whole party and the whole gambit that we have to keep this mobster in check.
te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Philip Smith of the Independent Media Institute brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After a year-long bombing campaign that pitted some of America's most high-tech Air Force fighter jets against primitive Taliban heroin labs, has quietly ended after failing to achieve much of anything, according to the latest report on continuing U.S. operations in Afghanistan from the Defense Department's Inspector General, obviously a liberal plant. The campaign, dubbed Operation Iron Tempest, like a tempest in a teapot dome scandal, was only the latest iteration of America's endless and fruitless effort to suppress the country's opium economy, which has delivered hundreds of millions of dollars a year into the hands of the Taliban and corrupt Afghan officials alike. Well, actually, before we started getting into that war with the Taliban, and before we allowed the Taliban to take over, remember those days? You don't? Yeah, well, opium and therefore heroin production was way, way down. And now they need it for fentanyl. They need lots of it. You think all of this opium and production is going for under the table products? No, it's right in there. Well, as part of the Trump administration's bid to look tough against both drugs and the Taliban, Iron Tempest in a teapot, dome scandal, is my addition to that. So just so you know. Well, that was unleashed in November of 2017 with F-22 stealth fighters and B-52 strategic bombers deploying 250 and 500-pound bombs against nondescript buildings in the Afghan hinterlands. Oh, there's a nondescript building. It's a crack house. It's a heroin lab. Oh, I like that. Those F-22s, designed to be deployed against the most advanced aircraft in the world, cost only $35,000 per flight hour. I thought it would be more. And they were used to blow up barrels, tubes, and piles of raw material that constitute Afghan heroin labs. Okay, they're supposed to be fighting other aircraft. But, yeah, let's blow up a bunch of tubes. Yeah, tubes with yellow cake from Africa. Well, the Inspector General reported quietly at the end of Iron Tempest in a teapot dome scandal, that the campaign was pretty much ineffective. The number of air raids dwindled. In the last 3 months of 2018, only 2 airstrikes took place, marking the end of the campaign. Operation Iron Tempest had gone out not with a bang, but with a whimper, which is the epitaph, probably of the whole American adventure in Afghanistan after nearly 2 decades of invasion and occupation. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Monday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here, right here, on Monday in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.